The Yakuza, the most notorious crime syndicate in Japan, seemed unstoppable for decades. They weave themselves into the very fabric of society with their ironclad codes, elaborate tattoos, and fearsome reputation. But what if I told you that the US CIA played a massive role in dismantling their empire? How could a foreign intelligence agency bring down one of the world's most powerful criminal organizations? And why did they even get involved in the first place? What secrets lie behind this extraordinary story? Buckle up, because what you're about to hear is as shocking as it is fascinating. Today, we'll explore the covert war the CIA waged against the Yakuza, a story of espionage, betrayal, and power plays that span decades. From post-World War II alliances to Cold War politics, economic manipulation, and secret operations, this is the tale of how the US government quietly targeted one of the world's most infamous criminal empires. But as the story unfolds, you'll find out the CIA didn't just weaken the Yakuza, they changed the game forever. And stick around to the end, because the real reason why the CIA did all this might blow your mind. To understand how the CIA got involved, we first need to understand what made the Yakuza so powerful. The Yakuza has existed in Japan for centuries, tracing its roots back to the Edo period. Originally, they were a mix of gamblers, street merchants, and so-called Robin Hood figures who gained favor with the locals. But by the 20th century, the Yakuza had evolved into a well-organized criminal network, heavily involved in extortion, gambling, human trafficking, and even legitimate businesses. By the 1940s, they weren't just street thugs, they were a parallel power structure. The Yakuza controlled neighborhoods, influenced politics, and even had ties to Japan's elite. Their influence was so strong that they practically operated in the open, with their offices marked by signs and their members proudly displaying their tattoos. But here's where it gets interesting. After Japan's defeat in World War II, the Yakuza found themselves facing a new world. The country was in ruins, and the US occupation brought significant changes. You'd think this would weaken the Yakuza, right? But instead, they thrived. Japan in the late 1940s was a chaotic place. The US occupation, led by General Douglas MacArthur, sought to rebuild the nation, disband the military, and introduce democratic reforms. But this period of upheaval also created opportunities for criminal organizations like the Yakuza. The Yakuza provided order where there was none. They acted as enforcers, protecting businesses and maintaining control in their territories. They also capitalized on the black market, smuggling goods and profiting from Japan's economic instability. Well, here is where the twist comes in. The Yakuza didn't just survive the US occupation. Instead, they grew stronger. And that's where the CIA comes in. But before they came in, why don't you subscribe fast for more discoveries like this? And don't forget to turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next discovery. Great. Now, let's get back to our CIA. During the early years of the Cold War, the CIA wasn't focused on the Yakuza. They were focused on communism. The Soviet Union was expanding its influence in Asia, and the US saw Japan as a critical ally. But Japan's economy was fragile, and the threat of a communist uprising loomed large. But the most shocking part of all was, in order to stabilize Japan and counter the communist threat, the CIA allegedly made deals with the Yakuza. Yes, the same criminal organizations they would later target. Declassified documents and insider accounts suggest that the CIA funneled money and resources to Yakuza-linked politicians and businesses. The idea was simple: strengthen Japan's economy and leadership to create a buffer against communism. But this short-term strategy came with long-term consequences. Fast forward to the 1970s and 1980s. By this point, Japan was an economic powerhouse, and the Yakuza had only grown more powerful. They weren't just running illegal operations. They were deeply embedded in Japan's banking, real estate, and corporate sectors. This made them a threat not just to Japan but to US interests as well. The CIA realized they had a problem. The Yakuza was no longer just a local crime syndicate. It was a global enterprise with reach into US-Japan trade deals and international politics. And even worse, Some Yakuza factions had begun collaborating with other criminal organizations, including the Italian Mafia. But still, the CIA's big question was, how do you dismantle an organization as entrenched as the Yakuza? Because now, the CIA couldn't just send in agents with guns. It required a more subtle approach. One of the CIA's key tactics was economic manipulation. By the 1980s, Japan's real estate market was booming, and the Yakuza were heavily invested. The CIA allegedly worked behind the scenes to create financial regulations that would destabilize the Yakuza's investments. For example, during Japan's infamous economic bubble burst in the early 1990s, many Yakuza-affiliated companies went bankrupt. While this was a broader economic collapse, some experts believe the U.S. had a hand in triggering it, knowing it would disproportionately affect Yakuza operations. But it wasn't just about money, because at the same time, the CIA also worked to expose Yakuza corruption within Japanese politics. By leaking information to journalists and using covert influence, they undermined the Yakuza's political allies, making it harder for them to operate with impunity. Another key strategy was going after Yakuza leaders. But instead of direct confrontations, the CIA used Japan's own legal system to do the dirty work. By sharing intelligence with Japanese law enforcement, the CIA helped create cases against key Yakuza bosses. One notable example is the crackdown on the Yamaguchi-gumi, Japan's largest Yakuza faction. In the 1990s, Japanese police launched a series of raids and arrests that crippled the group. While these actions were publicly framed as domestic law enforcement, some insiders suggest the CIA played a behind-the-scenes role, providing critical intelligence and resources. The CIA also used psychological warfare to turn public opinion against the Yakuza. Through media campaigns, they highlighted the Yakuza's brutality, corruption, and impact on Japanese society. This shift in perception made it harder for the Yakuza to operate openly. At the same time, the CIA supported anti-Yakuza movements within Japan, including grassroots organizations and activist groups. These efforts helped create a culture of resistance against the Yakuza, weakening their influence from within. By the 2000s, the Yakuza was a shadow of its former self. While they still exist today, their power and influence have been significantly reduced. But the CIA's involvement raises important questions. Did the ends justify the means? And what are the long-term consequences of the U.S. meddling in Japan's internal affairs? The story of how the CIA helped dismantle the Yakuza is a tale of strategy, manipulation, and power. It's a reminder of how far governments will go to protect their interests, and how even the most formidable organizations can be brought down. However, the big question remains: what other secrets are out there about the CIA's involvement in global affairs? And what does this story tell us about the true nature of power? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the CIA's actions were justified, or did they go too far? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Herloz discovery that uncover the hidden truths around the world, one story at a time.